afternoon, everyone. Just give it another minute or so. Helena, can you see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Super. Yeah, we normally just give a 30 seconds, but I hope everyone's having a good day. Thank you for joining our webinar. Looking forward to sharing some thoughts with you on carbon tracking. Helena, we're going to stick to time on this one, okay? I'm going to be timing us. Okay, let's make a start then. We are recording this, so if anyone joins late, they can catch up later. So, hello everyone. Thank you. Welcome to our latest webinar in our Net Zero series. We've called this one "Mastering Carbon Data: A Streamlined Approach to Reliable Emissions Accounting." I will briefly run through an agenda and an introduction, and then we'll leap into the heart of carbon accounting and why you need to be thinking about this, whether you would like to or not, within your business. So what our webinar will cover today, we'll have a look at what actually is carbon accounting, like what's involved and what is it that you need to do. We'll have a look at how that is incorporated into your broader net zero strategy. You know, carbon accounting is an important element of the wider journey that your business will inevitably go on. We're then going to give a demo of the software that we use to help clients track their long-term carbon performance. And then we'll just have a look at next steps. A super common question is how do you price these? How much does it cost? So I've just put a quick slide in there at the end to answer that question. We'll aim to stick to 40 minutes today. We like to leave a bit of space for Q&A at the end. In terms of speakers, so hello, for those that I haven't met, my name is Corinne. I look after the sales function here at Optimised. Done this work for the best part of 15 years now, and my job is to, it's sales, so I need to understand what your needs are and then structure our service and contracts to match the needs that you have. So I shall be glad to chair today. Helena, do you want to give a quick intro?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Helena Glover. I'm Senior Sustainability Consultant within the Net Zero Advisory team at Optimised. I've been at Optimised for just over 3 years now, and typically I'll be working on carbon accounting, target setting, data management, decarbonisation strategies, and mandatory and voluntary reporting.
Very good. Okay. One slide to introduce Optimised. Our marketing team told me we have current clients and potential new clients on here, so apologies if you already know this. It is just one slide though, so don't panic. So who are Optimised? We are an energy and sustainability advisory firm, climate advisory firm, if you will. There's some information about us on the right-hand side. You know, best part of 150 employees. I'm told 19,000 meters under management. I can't quite believe it, but that's what they say. We've got 4 offices in the UK, so Blackpool, Ashby, Bristol and Sittingbourne, fairly good spread across the country, and our clients are all in the industrial and corporate side of the market. As a sustainability advisory firm, there's a couple of sort of key areas that we've noticed a huge surge in demand the last couple of years. We have sort of boxed them on the left-hand side there. So we have incorporating asset performance into your sustainability initiatives. Asset improvement strategies is just getting more out of the current infrastructure on your site, basically. That's a popular one. The technical, financial and carbon appraisals. So because of the size of CapEx required on some of these decarbonisation initiatives, we're finding a lot of clients employ us to work out for them in advance the impact it would have on those KPI metrics there. Compliance, there's about 5 or 6 mandatory frameworks, another 5 or 6 voluntary. They mostly operate with a carrot or a stick mechanism. So we help clients with their carbon compliance obligations, and then dashboard reporting on net zero. This is a generic intro slide, but that last box there, bottom right, segments quite nicely into what we'll talk about today. So dashboard reporting on your net zero strategy performance. So what we need to first do is just explain a little bit what carbon accounting is and how it works. It's not too much. It's a couple of slides just to set the scene before we get into the data collection. So Helena is the best person to run through this. So over to you, Helena.
Thank you. So when we calculate greenhouse gas emissions, we will allocate them to one of three scopes. We have scope 1 emissions, which are your direct emissions associated with the combustion of fuels on site in facilities owned or controlled by the reporting company. So that might be company facilities or company vehicles. Then we've got scope 2, and these are indirect emissions associated with purchased electricity, heating, cooling, and steam. And those are the ones that are most widely reported on. Where it becomes a little bit more complicated are your scope 3 emissions. Here you've got 15 different emissions categories, and we split those into upstream emissions and downstream emissions. So in upstream, you might have categories like purchased goods and services. So looking at the data from your purchase ledger, waste generated in operations, looking at waste reports, or employee commuting, for example, where we'll collect data using a survey. And then downstream becomes a little bit more complicated. These are typically a little bit harder to get data for. They might be emissions associated with the processing of products that you've sold or the use phase of products. But what we'll do when we start a project with you is undertake a materiality assessment, and we help you determine which of all of these scope 3 categories are actually relevant to your organization and which ones you need to include within your emissions inventory and your net zero strategy. And where we don't have a complete data set and it is required that you report on a particular category, we can then support you in making any reasonable estimations or assumptions. So once you've got a hold on your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, you need to start thinking about how you're going to get to net zero. There's a lot of confusion in the industry around what net zero actually means, but if you take the definition from the Science Based Targets Initiative, from their corporate net zero standard, this is widely considered to be the industry best practice definition of net zero. And what it states is that a company needs to reduce their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions to 0 or to a residual level in eligible 1.5 degree scenarios or sector pathways. So what does that mean? It means you can't just focus on your scope 1 and 2 emissions. You do need to account for your scope 3 emissions, and you need to reduce those at a rate that is consistent with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial temperatures. And you can see that in the graph there on the right, indicated by the red dotted line. That's the rate that you need to decarbonize. And you're looking at about halving your emissions more or less by your near-term target. So that's the yellow line. And then your net zero target, which needs to be 2050 at the latest, you're looking at about a 90% reduction in emissions. And then once you've achieved that level of reduction, you need to neutralize any residual emissions with carbon removal offsets. And it's really important that along this journey, from where you're starting out now to your net zero journey, you are measuring and monitoring the progress that you are making in decarbonizing your emissions, so that you know whether you are on track, whether you are aligning with that 1.5 degree pathway, and that you're meeting your science-based targets.
And it's a good point. And I don't mind sharing loads of the clients that employ us either don't know why they set the net zero target that they did, or they've struggled to account the ongoing performance. And from my point of view, most companies I speak with are in one of those two positions. And look, I understand it. It's difficult. Everyone's busy, but hopefully those two slides just explain to you a little bit what you're actually supposed to be doing when you're carbon accounting towards a net zero strategy. So Helena's explained the science behind it. I just wanted to list a couple of reasons, business reasons, why you need to measure your carbon portfolio. So the first point on the left here, like naturally you're going to be contributing to your sector decarbonisation targets. And for those of you passionate about the climate, about future generation, there's the very simple principle of improving your business footprint on the world. We find in point 2, a lot of our recommendations under net zero strategy do actually reduce the energy expenditure that clients incur. Sometimes it's a byproduct rather than a key objective to reduce energy costs. But obviously, if you're trying to reduce your carbon emissions, a lot of that comes from reducing your energy consumption. And so you are highly likely going to see reduced energy costs on part of your journey. Reputation and investor confidence. So I'd say this is the top reason people come to us. In truth, they've either been given some investor questions or tasks to complete, or they have a customer tender, or they have a supplier demand to articulate their carbon performance. From a sales point of view, this is probably the top driver. And if you haven't already been asked a question, it's probably coming, to be honest with you, in the next few years. To align with emerging consumer attitudes, so I could rattle off 9 or 10 studies that show that particularly the sub-50 age group are increasingly focused on the carbon performance of the products that they purchase or the services that they engage in. So we've got quite a broad range of sectors joining this webinar, but particularly the younger generations, it's becoming a higher priority when they're considering what to purchase. We've touched briefly on the carbon regs. There's probably a new regulation every 6 months or so, and then the guidelines often change mid-term. So you need to be on top of what your legal and commercial obligations are there. And then the climate-related risks and resilience as well. So just a couple of reasons why beyond the health of the planet, you need to be measuring your ongoing carbon and data management performance. This slide I'm not going to talk about in too much detail because I'd like to get to Helena's demo, but you as the buyer or the lead stakeholder need to understand where carbon data management fits into your net zero strategy. So what is on this slide is the different stages that you're going to come across. I'm not saying you have to address them all right away, and I'm not saying you have to do them all with Optimised, to be frank, but I would like you to take this as a cheat sheet of the different ingredients in your recipe to building a credible and a meaningful net zero strategy. So typically you need to start with the ambition. So your stakeholder engagement, you need finance, procurement, board level support. You need energy managers, technical contacts. There's quite a few stakeholders who at some point are going to want to know what you're doing. And we need to do some baseline emissions and framework evaluation. So you probably heard me say it before, but I say it's like when I go on a diet every January, I need to understand what I weigh before I set a target to improve my weight. So it's the same concept here for your net zero strategy. The first thing we need to do is baseline you and set an appropriate base year for your project. We then look at target setting, label on the tin. So there's a range of frameworks that you can collect your carbon data under and monitor your carbon data under. Popular one is the Science Based Targets Initiative, but there are a few. So you need to navigate those and select an appropriate framework and target for your business. Then we come to data management. So this is what we'll talk about in this webinar in a bit more detail. This is the area, guys, that people most commonly fail respectfully with these projects. They put loads of effort into stage 1 and 2, and then they underestimate the task of the ongoing data management. If you're setting a net zero target for 2030 or 2040, you need to demonstrate your progress each year. You can't just leave it till 2029 or 2039. So we'll talk about these areas in a bit more detail shortly. You've then got insights and decarb. So at this point, you've set your targets and you understand how you're going to collect your data performance. You then need to actually reduce your carbon emissions to hit the target. So this is scope 1, 2, and 3. Let's not forget your supply chain base and how to reduce their emissions in your overall footprint. And then you need to look at reporting. So be it compliance, be it performance reporting, it doesn't come at the end of the project, but it's one of the later considerations you need to make. What are you going to do with this data management, and how are you going to report with the data? So a real quick cheat sheet, what you need to be looking at. And in reality, you're probably doing some of these things already in isolation, but it's just pulling them all together that's the tricky bit, to be honest with you. So by this point, if we just pause, we've explained to you the high-level science of carbon accounting. I mean, we could talk to you for a week straight about the detail, but we've tried to give you a short appraisal. So there's the science of the accounting, there's why you need to do it, and there's where it fits into your journey. So now we want to talk about the software and how we would recommend that you do it. There are lots of ways to track your carbon performance. So we're going to give a demo now of what a piece of software looks like to support you with that requirement. And we'll also talk about roles and responsibilities, which is another big sort of hiccup that the clients come across. So over to you, Helena.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to introduce our software solution, but just as a bit of background, quite often clients come to us with a variety of issues around data management. Often emissions data is kept in spreadsheets, people aren't sure where the numbers have come from, maybe key stakeholders have left the business and you've lost the audit trail along the way. And it is really impossible under those circumstances to effectively communicate your emissions data to key stakeholders like investors, customers, suppliers. And it's very difficult to guarantee compliance with regulatory frameworks if you cannot trust the quality of your data. So that's really what we're trying to avoid with our solution that we have here. For carbon accounting, we would never recommend relying on Excel-based data management, just due to the risks that it poses in terms of long-term maintenance and auditability. So at the same time, we do understand that selecting the right kind of carbon emissions data management software can be a really challenging and daunting task. But at Optimised, we undertook a partner tender and evaluated over 10 different software partners. And we ended up selecting the one that scored the highest in our evaluation and is also trusted by thousands of clients globally. And we very imaginatively named our service offering built around this software, the Optimised Carbon Tracking System. So how it works is our carbon experts support you with our advisory services alongside the use of this best-of-breed software. And we work to educate and engage key stakeholders, provide guidance on relevant frameworks and standards, and we make sure that you maintain really strong data integrity. So Optimised Carbon Tracking System, the main functionalities of it is that it really easily allows you to track your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And the scope 3 emissions there, the value chain emissions, is where the software platform really shines, because through this software, we have access to a wide variety of different emission factor databases. And through that, access to tens of thousands of different life cycle analyses. So it means that we can really drill down into your value chain emissions and get some really accurate insights and calculations for you. And once we've got that data in the platform, you can then create annual emissions inventories aligned with lots of different industry best practice frameworks like GHG Protocol, ISO 14064, and you can start to build a credible net zero data management plan with the support of our carbon experts. And it does not matter if you are just starting your net zero journey now and you don't know where to start, or whether you're actually more mature in this area, you've already started looking into it and you just want to enhance your current reporting. It doesn't matter where you are on that journey. This system really just takes the complexity out of carbon accounting and takes a lot of the burden off you and onto us to support you with, you know, all of this carbon accounting, reporting, and insights.
Is it over to the demo now, Helena?
Yes.
I'll
Let me
stop sharing.
just take the screen from you.
About 20 minutes.
Okay. Does that come out okay?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, perfect. So now that I've introduced the carbon tracking system, let's walk through how it actually works in practice. So I'm going to take you on a sort of chronological journey through the platform, showing the typical stages of its use. And we're going to start by looking at how to set operational and organizational boundaries to create a really robust framework for your carbon accounting. Then we'll look at the import and request features, how we get the data into the platform, and then finally how you can access the data within your emissions inventory and view the emissions data within this carbon dashboard. So by the time we start pulling together all of the information in this boundary section of the platform, we will have already had a few meetings with your internal stakeholders. So it's really important to have those meetings in what we call a net zero project team, so that we've got all of those key stakeholders engaged and we can discuss what are your organizational boundaries, what are your operational boundaries, exactly what is going to be included within your emissions inventory and that calculation. What's your base year going to be? What reporting periods are we going to cover? And we discuss this together. And once we've determined all of these factors, we'll put it into the platform for you so that it's ready and set up. So for example, here you can see the 2 reporting years that we've input. You can then put in the organizational units. So we'll set this up to reflect however you want it to be presented within your dashboard or in your reports. You might wish for this to be broken down by organizational entity, or alternatively, you might want to have a breakdown of your building portfolio by site. And it's just so that we can allocate emissions according to these organizational units. We'll then put in the activity categories for you. So at this point, we would have had a materiality assessment with you, and we'll determine from that assessment which scope 3 categories are actually relevant to your operations, which are the most material in terms of importance to stakeholders, ability to influence. And then we'll determine your approach to carbon accounting, whether you want to try and include all of the relevant categories, whether you're just going to focus on a few of the most material categories. And once we've got that approach solidified, we will plug those in for you here. So as you can see here, we've got upstream scope 3 categories, some downstream scope 3. And for this demo client, these ones are going to be unused at the moment, not included within the calculations at this point. But in the future, if we want to revisit that and expand the reporting scope, we can add those back in. On this page, we set up your emission factors as a default. So we can choose emission factors from any of the databases, but just in terms of default categories for scope 1 and 2, you might want to use only conversion factors from DEFRA, from the UK government. In this one here, we've put down XEO base for spend-based emission factors. But we've got this factor library here with a variety of different databases that we can pull from. So this will all be part of our discussions with your net zero project team to find the factors that match best with your data to get the best results. We can also add custom fields. So if you would like to see within the dashboard or within your reports a breakdown of your emissions that have been allocated to particular products, for example, or perhaps a particular project, we can use these custom fields as a type of tag within your emissions, pardon, your emissions inventory, and allocate that to certain rows of data. And finally, business metrics. So here, if you'd like to, you can add any business metric. It might be number of full-time employees, revenue, production metrics, and you can then use that within, again, the dashboard or within your reports to see your emissions intensity. So for example, tons of carbon per full-time employee. And once we've got all of the boundaries set up for you, that's when we will look at getting the right data into the platform. There's a few different ways that we can do this. So one of the ways that we can do it is by setting up bespoke APIs with our technology team at Optimised. And that way we can pull directly from some of your systems straight into the platform. Other ways are that we can request data through the platform using data collection templates. And we can also just take your data from you in the format that you have it. For example, if you have a purchase ledger, we can take that from you, do any data cleansing that's needed, any data manipulation, map your procurement categories to emission factors within one of our databases, and take that burden of that part of the calculation off you. And once we've collected your data, we can then import it for you. So as I said, no matter what format the data comes in, we can work with it to get it to a state where we can upload it into the platform. And at that point, the calculation happens within the platform and shows up in your emissions inventory. Here you can really drill down into.
I'll just interrupt you, Hannah, there.
Go
Just
on.
on the data point,
Mm-hmm.
to those listening, the data is going to take you a bit of time. Like we see also like all sorts of data sets and data formats, and like Helena said, we can work with most data forms, but we are finding clients take quite a long time to figure out what their own data is. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the time that can take sometimes for the client to actually understand their own data sets and what they have available and things like that. We've found that takes longer than we anticipate from the client side.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something that maybe during the base year is a bit of a longer process, but from there we see that, you know, every year afterwards it's very much streamlined, and a lot of clients then work on updating the data collection process so that they can get even better data and more accurate data and more quickly each year. So within your emissions inventory, you can see the data here, and you can really drill down in more detail into exactly how this was calculated. So this is where the audit trail comes in. You can see the organizational unit, the period that it's been assigned to, where the emission factor has come from. Each emission factor from the database has a certain level of factor certainty that it comes with, so you can kind of get an idea of how accurate or certain the calculation is. And you can also see a breakdown of the greenhouse gases here. And once you're done drilling down into the details here and you want to visualize the real high level impact of your footprint, that's where the dashboard really comes into play. So on here, you can visualize the carbon data from the reporting year broken down by activity. So here, for example, you can see that the majority of this organization, most of it is coming from upstream scope 3 emissions, and we're looking at predominantly purchased goods and services. Also got downstream transportation distribution taking up a lot here, but these are the kind of insights that you can look into to understand what's actually making up your carbon footprint and which are the areas that are going to need to be a focus in your net zero strategy to actually reach that net zero target. Where do you need to decarbonize? And you can compare reporting periods here. So for example, this is your baseline year, 2020. Have a look at how it's changed over the year. You can see a reduction, some increases in some areas, and that triggers an analysis into why has that gone up, why has it gone down, what's going on in our operations, and how can we ensure that it maintains a steady level of decarbonisation. Similarly, you can break down the data by organizational unit, and you have a summary here of what I was just talking about with the uncertainty factor. So you can kind of get an idea of to what level of certainty have these calculations got in terms of the emission factors that have been used. If you want to drill down a bit further, you can also go into the compare tab here, and you can have a look at the different years, for example. You can have a look at the different activity groups, the different sites, and compare these. And all of these tables will be available within the reports that you can also download from the platform. Similarly, If you are missing the pivot table feature of your Excel spreadsheets, you can access that there. But the main output that you will be interested in are the reports. So here you can get out-of-the-box reports that align with the main industry standards. So for example, an emissions inventory aligned with GHG protocol or ISO 14064. You've got ESRS in here, which is an EU reporting framework, SECA, internal report. So this is more of a breakdown of everything that's in the platform with all of those tables that you've seen from the dashboard. And equally, if you just want to get an export of everything that's within the system, you can do an Excel export from here. And what we do as well, if you're not interested in the out-of-box reports, we can prepare reports using this data and adding extra levels of analysis to it, extra levels of strategy. How are you actually going to decarbonize based off these base year figures, providing insights into what you need to do to reach net zero. So we can really build on these reports as well. There's other features within the site that I'm not going to get into right now, but if you are interested in seeing more of what the platform can do, then get in touch with either me or Corinne, and we'd be happy to set up another demo for you to go into more detail.
Yeah, our first demo was about an hour long, but we didn't think people would last that long, so we've had to condense it. But yeah, there's much more to cover, should you wish. Okay, good stuff, Helena. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Good. So about half an hour in, guys. Thank you for staying with us. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I can see a few questions. When we talk to clients about data management and what they need to do, we find there's a lot of confusion around the roles and responsibilities. So, Helena, do you want to just talk us through how we would prefer to run these? Because I think it's a big confusion point during the process.
Yeah, definitely. So our approach to this is that we want to try and take as much of the burden of this type of work off the client as possible. So in terms of client responsibilities, we're looking at provision of data, which I discussed before. So whether it be through API or data collection templates, surveys, we support you with collecting that data, but that data needs to be provided by the client. And from there, we would also need you to attend stakeholder meetings. So that's as part of the Net Zero project team, just to discuss the quality of that data, agree on any assumptions and estimations that we're making, and ensure that the progress of the engagement is going to plan and we're going to meet our deadlines. But from there, there's really no other responsibilities on the client to do any of the work. You have access to the dashboard if you want to use it, but you're not obliged to use it. We have some clients that don't interact with it. They prefer for us to put the data in, keep it there, monitor it, draw insights from it, prepare the reports for them, add analysis and strategy. And they don't actually interact with the platform. But equally, you're very much free to play around with the platform in terms of accessing the inventory, the dashboard, and some of the other features that I haven't gone through today. We'll make sure through our methodologies, through the way that we're calculating the emissions, that you are adhering to any compliance requirements in terms of the frameworks that you've chosen to comply with. And we will make sure that the system is populated with comprehensive, high quality data, free of any gaps, maintaining really strong data integrity, and supported by a really reasonable factor certainty as well. So that's all on us. Minimal burden on the client, that's our approach.
Yeah, and I would just add, we do have some clients where we adjust the scopes around their capabilities. So if you've got a really hot sustainability manager or a really great energy manager, we will flex the scope. But we've had a few challenges where, respectfully, the clients are full of beans about doing work themselves, and then sometimes the client doesn't do the work and you get into difficulty. So we will tailor around clientability, but the projects that complete the quickest and run the smoothest are a little bit more outsourced in truth. But we can just have a conversation about that when the time comes. Okay, great, 35 minutes. So the final slide, when we wrote this, we looked at commonly asked questions. So we're trying to head them off for you. How are the client requirements evaluated? Like, what do we need to know to structure your data management solution? So there's just a few bits here that will come up in conversation with between you and your colleagues internally and between you and us. So understanding the client goals, we have some clients that report under SBTI. We have others that want to build internal methodologies. We have others that use other frameworks. That's quite a big driver because there's obviously data management best practice associated with each. Client requirements, so you need to have a think about, do you just want the basic service? Do you want an annual emissions inventory? The emissions inventory are popular. That'll be what your investors tend to ask you for. It's like your financial accounts at year end, they just want your emissions. And scope 1 and 2, a lot of you will do that in-house, but the scope 3 is the bit that's trickier because of the supply chain element. A couple of clients want the full sustainability report, so that includes wider measures your business is taking beyond the net zero journey on your sustainability performance. We need to wrestle with your scope 3 boundaries and your scope 3 emissions. There are 15 categories. You don't have to account all of them. Sometimes it is appropriate to select the scope 3 emissions with the highest impact on your footprint. So we don't want to overscope with you, and we don't want to overcommit you on your reporting. So we are going to have to do a bit of therapy on your scope 3 emissions and which ones to include. And then reporting frequency, is this part of a wider journey or is this in response to a specific requirement? And budget availability as well. So these are the areas that you need to just have a think about when you're setting up your data man. Do you have budget for professional software? Do you have budget for advisory? If you don't, have you got somebody in-house who's going to look after a lot of this for you? So again, just a bit of a cheat sheet, what you need to be looking out for. So that takes us to the end of the organised content. As a reminder of what we've covered today, then, we've looked at the science of carbon accounting and what you're actually achieving with the task. We've looked at why your business either already has to do it or will be obliged to in the next couple of years. We've looked at one of the pieces of software available. It's the one that we choose to use for clients. Look, there's lots of software out there, guys. Go and explore the market, go and have a look, but hopefully you'll have this information available now for considering what we think is the current optimum solution. And then we've just looked a little bit at roles and responsibilities and what good and bad look like. So a little bit of education, a little bit of a demo today. I think we have some questions for the little bit of time remaining. Let me I've stopped sharing my screen. If anyone has any other questions, please send them through and somehow marketing speak to me from beyond the Zoom privacy walls. Helena, we have 4 questions. Is half-hourly data shown in the platform? Let's take this one.
Sure. So I think one thing that's important to understand is this is an emissions data platform. So the dashboard and the inventory will be to show you your carbon emissions, not your energy consumption data. We put in energy consumption data to calculate emissions, but it is by no means half hourly. It is not that level of granularity. You're taking total consumption values and converting it into carbon data.
Yeah, it's a fair question. There are plenty of platforms out there that will profile their half-hourly data. We didn't find any that do both, and like it's quite hard to do both in the same dashboard specifically. But if you need your half-hourly data or your gas data profiled, ask, and there's a couple of different solutions we can talk to you about there. Does this cover CBAM requirements? Helena, do you want to explain what CBAM is, and then
Yeah, sure. So
this is
CBAM is
something manufacturing, eh?
yeah, it's more relevant to manufacturing and intensive industries. It stands for the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. At the moment, we only really have CBAM EU regulations in place, so it's relevant to you if you are importing or exporting to the EU. Soon we're going to have the CBAM UK regulations in place. That is under consultation at the moment, so it's something to bear in mind if you're in a heavy industry. But in terms of the functionality of the platform, yes, you can use those custom fields to allocate emissions to particular products, and that will help give you what you need for those reporting requirements, where you will have to disclose the emissions associated with those particular carbon intensive products.
Nice new bit of legislation then to be keeping up with. I think the manufacturing guys were speaking about that the other day, weren't they? Does this report capture flag forestry land emissions?
Yeah. So again, flag emissions, flag stands for forestry, land and agriculture. And these are emissions that you'll have to report on if you have significant emissions in agriculture or other forestry areas, or you're dealing with products made of paper, for example. So this is something that we're seeing more and more of. People who are relevant to those organizations, they need to report on both flag and regular emissions, and they will need to set both regular and flag targets. So it's something to bear in mind, and it's another thing that the platform is capable of doing. So within our emission factor databases, we have emission factors that break down those emissions by the regular fossil-only emissions, biogenic emissions, and land use only emissions. So short answer, yes. If you need to calculate flag emissions, we can use this platform to do it.
I have a question for myself, Helena.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. What goes wrong setting up these contracts? What's the risks here? What do we need to watch out for? You know, disaster horizon scanning, client data, I guess.
I mean, I don't think that we haven't encountered too many problems so far in terms of using these platforms. I suppose, yeah, client data in terms of you do need to increase the accuracy of your data collection. Sometimes we're working with data sets where we're making a lot of estimations and a lot of assumptions, and you really have to take that data with a pinch of salt. So I'd say only there really you need to put the effort into improving your data collection processes, and that's something that needs to be done internally.
Yeah, I feel like it's data, the contracts I've mobilized, and I don't say that lightly. I'm not having a go, but it seems to just take clients a little bit of time to get their heads around
Yeah.
what they've got. The final question then is one that I will answer. How long does it take to set up a contract? It depends what you mean by set up a contract. I mean, to do the baseline, it depends on the size of your portfolio, how complicated your business is, but to do the baseline inventory, the materiality assessment, the data capture, and to get the platform set up, I don't know what our director would tell me to say. I would say 2 to 3 months, leaving a little bit of buffer for natural delays. I'm going to go with 2 to 3 months, but they might say slightly longer if they're very busy. But you just need to be aware of those sorts of timeframes from, if you have a deadline to get this sorted by June, then I'd say don't leave it past January, February time to get your ducks in a row. So yeah, it doesn't take that long to do the work. It's the data, guys, like I keep saying, and getting that straightened out so that it's meaningful what is in the platform, and it helps you drive meaningful change.
I think we've got another question in the chat from Brian. When you do a materiality assessment, can this be expanded to double materiality as per CSRD? Short answer, yes. We can create a bespoke assessment. Similarly, if you want to go beyond double materiality and you want to look at further ESG factors as well within a materiality assessment, we can tailor it to that.
Yeah.
And there's one more. Yes. So are you saying that by using this platform, our data will have a higher level of assurance? Absolutely, yes. It's being verified at many stages along the process, and the quality assurance is there to ensure that it's aligning with all industry best practice, and the methodology and assumptions are very documented in a very detailed manner. It's very transparent.
And we will help as well if you ask us to. You know, we've had auditors come up to us 6 months later and say, "Hey, can you talk us through when we write the emissions inventories and the methodologies?" They're quite long because we're trying to stave off questions that come in a couple of years' time. Why did you do it like that? Why did you capture in this boundary? So we try and head that off by writing like really long methodology statements for you, but you can always just send it back to us if you get audited and we will advise for you. We've had a few clients doing that already from a few years ago, so we're not just gonna leave you be if you get questions there. We have another question. Oh, good stuff. Thank you you're very welcome. Another question. Good afternoon. The emission factor libraries will be updated, question mark. How many libraries will we have available to use?
Yep, so the emission factor libraries are updated regularly, and also in line with client requirements. So if we are getting a lot of call for a particular emissions library that isn't on there as well, that we currently don't have access to, then we can put in that request. But at the moment, it's just counting right here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 different databases that we have access to. The main ones that we tend to use are EcoInvent, which is the latest one that they've released, and ExioBase, IPCC, and the government UK factors as well. But there's a variety of different ones on there, and they are regularly updated.
I want to know exactly how much. We'll find out for you. We'll clarify it in your audit reports. Awesome. Okay, I think we've kept to time a little bit over, but some nice questions coming through. Oh, we have another question. Brian. Brian saying, I think our marketing might have muted the participants, so apologies if you've been trying to speak. I probably should have said that. Terrible question. If we start using this platform and then part company with Optimised for some of the other services, what happens to our access to this?
Yeah. So before you part ways, I briefly showed it before in the report section. There's an export function where you can export all of your data that's within that platform into an Excel spreadsheet so that you have everything that's actually in there. And then it's all completely wiped from the system. So none of your data is at any risk.
I don't mind being the contract police here. So the way that the service works is we'll have a term on our contract with the client, and it'll be something that we discuss with you that both sides are happy with. It's typically 3 years. We have some shorter, some longer. And that service agreement is separate to the other services that you'll have with us, that they all contract separately. So there's no like complication. And then as Helena says, if you decide to part ways with Optimised, heaven forbid, you can just export it and take it with you. So there shouldn't be any difficulty there. You're very welcome, Brian. Okay. Any other questions, please reach out to us or your account manager for the current clients, and otherwise we'll let you go. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for showing interest in your business carbon performance and in improving your data management. And good luck. Yeah, hope to see you soon. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.